Hey now, we are live with the Council of Tolkien, and I have Matt and Sid with me. Welcome to another broadcast. Today is going to be, the Council of Tolkien podcast. Let me just take the emote off and put up my alert that today's stream will be no cursing, including in the chat.
Including in black speech.
Oh, man. I do know a few Elvish curse words, but I don't know Orcish curse words.
I bet they sound beautiful.
Well, the thing about the Orcish dialects, including the black speech of Mordor, is everything sounds like a curse. It's like, snag, and it's like, oh, damn, what did he say? And it's just in the darkness. You know what I mean? Like, hey, Alice. Hey, Ted. How's it going, guys?
Trying to order an ice cream cone in German.
I think there'll be a couple of Orcish curses from Mordor in the fight between the two orcs.
I guess snaga is
Yeah.
It's not a curse word, but it's used as a pejorative. It means slave, and the larger orcs tend to call the smaller ones that. All right, let me just get this message out. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Alice. Okay, let me get that pinned. All right, and we're done. Okay, all right. Now I'm just going to get the word out to a few places that we are indeed live. And, yeah. Oh, and by the way, Sid, the pork buns came out wonderfully. They were wonderful.
So good.
I had 4 of them. It was delightful. So, yeah, we were talking about it earlier to catch you up, Matt. Last week I had made barbecue spare ribs, and I cut the meat off of the bones, and my mother baked them into buns to make like a Chinese-style pork bun. And it was quite delicious.
Sounds really nice.
It was.
Wish you wouldn't have said anything, because we're going to be on this show for a while.
Yeah, and you're like, no, I'm hungry. Well, that's the streamer's life, because sometimes I'll just be like, just streaming, and the discussion in the chat room will turn to food, and I'll be like, oh my God, you guys are making me hungry, And I won't eat on camera, so. I mean, even if I didn't have the camera, I wouldn't want people to hear my eating noises.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, Alice. It sounds like you have a terrible headache. My moderator, Alice, said that their head is pounding like a drum, and they feel like they're going to retch, and they feel drained of energy, but weirdly not tired. And all I can think is of drums in the deep. Drums in the deep. Hey, Moogle, how's it going? So, yeah, we're going to have the regular format today where each of us will have like a half-hour discussion. Not that I'll talk for a half hour, but I'll have a topic that I'll bring up, and we'll speak about it for a half hour, and then it will be Sid's turn, and then it will be Matt's turn. I'm trying to shuffle it up so that the turn order is unique for every episode. So, and then until we run out of permutations, and then we'll just roll back to the first one and repeat that. We are on the starting soon screen right now, or our adventure shall begin shortly screen right now, but the background for this episode is going to be the Gates of Moria, which I'm sure, Sid, you saw that, right?
Yeah, looks great.
So that's a cool little piece of art that I got off of the internet, and I'll take the time right now to credit the artist, even though when this goes up on YouTube, there will be an attribution in the description, as there always is. But that was from an artist called, I hope I'm saying it right, Delamari. They could be found on artstation.com. It's D. Lamari, all one word. And they did a great, like, sort of 3D render of the mines of Moria. The one thing you can't see in the image that we're going to be using is the lower portion where the light is reflected in the pool there,
Doesn't La Maria mean something in High Elvish?
Say that again.
Doesn't La Maria mean something in High Elvish?
You're thinking, I think, of Namaria, but it's like the letter D and then Lamari. I don't think it's a Quenya name. I think it might be his first initial and his last name. But like I said, in all of my videos, whether it's the question and answers or Council of Tolkien and everything, if you're ever curious about the background images that I use, there's always an attribution link in the description. So there's that. But anyway, gentlemen, it is 7:30. It is past 7:30 actually. So we're going to head over here to the Council of Tolkien, and now our audience can actually see the lovely artwork that I was talking about. And and that's not a bad idea, Alice. I might have to do that as well. I don't really use the pinned comment feature on YouTube all that much. Now, before we even get started, I know both Matt and Sid had something to talk about. Sid, yours is probably quicker, so we're going to go first. You had something to talk about the cherries and the strawberries.
This came up because of a very obscure holiday in the Celtic calendar called Lunased, which is August 2nd or sometimes 1st. And
So it could be today.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I thought of it. It's the summer feast of the harvest of berries. And John and I were talking about it, and that cued in a discussion of the year 1420 in the Shire with the blessing from Galadriel through Sam's box of dust and everybody celebrating. And there are two mentions. One is strawberries and cream was a celebratory dessert or treat that year. And the other is what I consider to be possibly the strangest, or for me, certainly most intriguing image in all of the Lord of the Rings. And I'll say what it is, and I'd like if you guys have other just one-off images that Tolkien burned into your brain. It's after describing all the things that all of the hobbits, especially the children, did to celebrate the year 1420 and the renewal of the Shire, the freedom of the Shire, and the renewal of the Shire, it says that, and after the children ate, they piled the pits of their cherries like the skulls of fallen enemies.
I actually have I brought it up very quickly. I have it right here if you want me to read the quick paragraph for emphasis. It actually doesn't say cherries, but it implies that it could be cherry pits, which are called stones in British rural British slang. Altogether, 1420 in the Shire was a marvelous year. Not only was there wonderful sunshine and delicious rain in due times and perfect measure, but there seemed something more, an air of richness and growth, and a gleam of beauty beyond that of mortal summers that flicker and pass upon this middle earth. All the children born or begotten in that year, and there were many, were fair to see and strong, and most of them had a rich golden hair that had before been rare among hobbits. The fruit was so plentiful that young hobbits very nearly bathed in strawberries and cream, and later they sat on the lawns under the plum trees and ate, until they had made piles of stones like small pyramids or the heaped skulls of a conqueror, and then they moved on, and no one was ill, and everyone was pleased, except those who had to mow the grass.
They sound like they were plum pits, probably.
It could be, yeah, because they sat under plum trees, it's true. Stone is a rural British slang for a hard pit of a fruit. I got asked this question on Quora once, like, what is the weirdest, most disturbing passage in the Lord of the Rings? And that's immediately I thought of that.
I was thinking about it a little further, and you occasionally get reflections that might be from Tolkien's own personal experience. And I'm thinking about how World War I impacted the consciousness of England. And, soldiers were drafted as young as 15 sometimes. And so their younger brothers and sisters would be hearing war stories in a way that had never before happened. And I strongly suspect that Tolkien noticed that the way children were behaving after the war was with a lot more fighting and darkness and battling for victory than before the war. And he let a little bit of that leak in, which is something he rarely did. But that's my guess as to where it came from. Pure speculation. It makes sense.
I agree with you, and I do want to hear from Matt, but before we go to him on that, just from the chat room coming in, two things. One is we have a new viewer, Grumpy Boy, who just said that I must have Saruman-like persuasion for convincing him to come to Twitch, to install the Twitch app and to come here. Welcome to the broadcast, Grumpy Boy. We hope you have fun here. And also from the chat room, Alice has pointed out that it could be a juxtaposition of describing innocence or emphasizing innocence by describing something that's very distant from it.
Which was exactly the experience of the entire Shire, 1,400 years of innocence, and then 1 year of tremendous horror, and then a restoration of innocence. So it's the Shire forever.
I mean, they had horrors in their past, but not in living memory. Matt, what are your thoughts on this quickly?
I think that it's just a really, actually pretty passage, a beautiful passage.
It is.
The descriptions he uses to describe the season and the little kids and just the dynamic of it is just really pretty. I actually really like it.
It's interesting because The Lord of the Rings has such an emphasis for being like, it has a reputation of being like a glorified food blog of hobbits, and that's not true because meals are rarely described, but in this section and in the next is a lot of food talk about strawberries and cream and plums, and in the next they mention the leaf, the hobbit leaf, and the barley and the wine and the beer, and the vintage of proper 1420. But
because it goes from childhood to adult beverages, and it just struck me, it's right at the end of the entire book, and he might be thinking of child readers, more akin to those who read The Hobbit, and just coming with a beautiful wrap-up about how life is in the now of the book.
And it could also sort of emphasize what you were mentioning, Sid, about Tolkien did not write allegory, but you could find his thoughts on certain matters in the book, as you could find any author's thoughts, especially regarding war. And that loud noise was a new YouTube subscriber. Thank you very much. Of young children going off to war, some of them as young as 15, and coming home and doing something, innocent, but having a different perspective on it, like seeing a pile of stones, whatever fruit they may have come from. I do agree that it was probably plums. And then thinking of heaps of skulls or something traumatic in that sense. Let's move over to Matt before we start in earnest, because you also had something to talk about, and it was related to Shire Post, which is not at all a sponsor of the channel, at least not yet. But they sent us some things, and I know you want, and I showed them off in a video that you guys, if you're watching on YouTube, you've already seen it. But for those of you on Twitch, it is the video that is live right now for members, and will be going live to everybody else on the 7th. Of August. But go ahead, Matt, and tell us a little bit about Shire Post and what they sent us.
Well, the owner there, Tom Berenger, who is the CEO and president of Shire Post Mint, started out as a post office where they had stamps and things, but then they went on to minting coins. We kind of talked about that in the last show. Got to talking to Tom and ordered some things for our team, the 9, sent them out, and then got into a conversation with him about doing another coin, which was focused on King Elendil and making kind of a numenorian coin, since he was the last essential king of Numenor, really, in one way. And we got to talking about that, and I said, you should construct it the way they have this coin online, or Milkor. And he says, "Oh, well, that's ours." And I said, "Oh my gosh, is that really yours?" He goes, "Yeah, we did that many years ago, but we couldn't sell it. We had to put them into into purgatory, basically, in our safe, and we couldn't do anything with them." And I said, you have how many of those do you have?" And he goes, "Well, I have probably about 100 of them. They're all in iron, and if anybody goes out and looks at them, they're the Melkor's crown coin with the 3 Silmarils in it. It's just a really cool. A lot of people use it for pictures, and
it's a beautiful piece. If it wasn't sitting all the way back there, I'd show it off right now.
Yeah, yeah. So I said, I would love to have as many as you could give me. And he goes, "Well, I can only give them to you, but I can't sell them to you because I can't sell them." And so out of his kind heart, he sent me 15. And they are as good as platinum, gold, whatever, as far as
diamonds,
collectible items.
Mithril.
Yeah, you can't get them. They're not for sale. I think there might have been 1 or 2 that ever got put out, and but when you look at it online and you try to get them, it just comes up blank, blank, blank. Not even AI can find a way to get them. But
I did look into it myself, and
one of them ourselves.
Yeah, there were pictures of people that had them, but nobody was selling them.
Well, now, John, you have one because I sent one to you, and I stamped the letter that I stamped
I have the seal
for you in wax. A wax seal from Angband.
It was strange to get a letter from Angband. But then again, the previous letter that you sent me had come from Mordor, according to the black seal on it.
I know. It's just not getting happier and happier, is
it? Next, it's going to be Utumno.
Yeah. I don't even know what's happening. It's just happening that way.
I was in Rivendell and got Matt's letter from Mordor, and it actually got held up in customs for a week.
Well, that's those Gondorian postmen, And
it was cool, and then along with that, I sent some Shire Post stuff that Tom researched many years ago, related to the 4 regions of the Shire and how much the postal rates would be, and he had this whole research and this map that he did by hand. By the way, that copy I gave you, John, is a copy of a handwritten one that he did himself. If it doesn't look like Tolkien, I don't know what does.
It really does, and I think the date on that was 1992.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm glad I got it.
I was 12 years old.
You're kind of that. Well, we're all kind of experts in certain things, but you are definitely a Shire experts, and you have the seal from the Shire, so you're the guy.
Sarah.
And so I sent that out for you to take a look at. I'm kind of hoping that at some point you're going to do something with it, John, and write an article on Quora that definitively gives us something related to that research. Then you let us know that it's up.
Okay, I mean about the Shire and the Postal Service specifically.
Yeah,
cool. Perhaps that's not something for Quora. Perhaps that's more for our book.
Cool.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Touche.
Because we are doing that. Coming from the chat room, Sid, somebody wants to know where you got the British pint glass. Never seen an American using one of those. Okay, Sid, we're having a hard time hearing you. You're a little distorted.
Oh. Cheers, everybody.
Okay, now we can hear.
These are available on Amazon. The brand is Arkarock, and they are very strong.
Can you tell me how to spell that so I could put it into the chat room?
Arcoroc.
Arcoroc. Arkarock. And of course, we're not sponsored by them either, just answering a question from the chat. And just to let you know, I think we talked about this already, Matt, but I have a friend who has a friend that is as much as we are into Tolkien, this woman is into the post office. She is a bona fide post office nerd. And when I had posted pictures of the coin, the Shire coin, and the Morgoth coin, and the stamps that you sent from Will Whitfoot of the Shire, and I posted them on my Discord, and those were passed along to this person whose name is escaping me right now, but is like I said, a postal nerd, and she was apparently squeeing with delight, and then wanted pictures of everything that I had. So all those papers you sent me, the maps, the postal rates, the stamp, the postmarks, everything. I took pictures of all of that and sent that along, and she was incredibly happy to see it, because the idea of the fantasy post office and it being so fleshed out, not necessarily in this case by the author, but by the fandom, which is something that Tolkien supported, was very, very cool to them.
I only had 4 strips of those stamps, a complete set, and I was going to make a copy of them and send them to you, and I was looking at it going, there ain't no way John's going to go for a copy. So
they're too cool.
I ripped off a whole line of them, but they are totally, absolutely, cool. Legitimately look realistic, yeah.
And in my question and answer show on YouTube, episode 69, which is coming out on August 7th, has full, clear pictures of the entire run of stamps and both sides of the Melkor coin.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. All right, let me set up the timer here.
It's been a good relationship to kind of talk about.
Yeah. I hope to, maybe if we could pull Tom into one of these meetings one day and speak to him, because I'd love to go over my own ideas for possibilities for Medallionic art. I mean, we talked about Lindon, and I think absolutely the Grey Havens, a nice big ship, you know, with Círdan on the reverse would be a fantastic coin. That was the one that I would want the most, even more so than the Shire. And you talked about Elendil, and I think that the Tolkien estate might be a little bit weird about Numenor. But I think that if it was sold as Dol Amroth, descended from the Lords of Adunie, which is what Elendil was. He wasn't really a king of Numenor. He was nobility. He was a king of Gondor and Arnor, but he was one of the Lords of Adunie, and that leads into, you know, Imrazor and Prince Imrahil and a whole principality in Gondor. Ithilien would be a fantastic one too, you know. But I think that an Elendil.
I talked to Tom about it. We talked actually for probably 25 minutes just on this one issue. And I was helping. He goes, what's your thoughts about getting around this, you know, as far as a letter to the Tolkien estate? And I said, well, if you go after Elendil with you know, his initials ELNDL on the bottom of the coin, like the Morgoth coin, the Melkor coin, you got to go at it with symbology from Gondor as the first king of Gondor. You can't be from Numenor in any way on that coin, or else you're going to violate the right agreement you have.
Yeah.
So
he could probably put the phrase Westernesse on there, because it's said in the Lord of the Rings ad nauseum.
Yeah, and I focused on that part of it so that he would be squarely from the Lord of the Rings, where he has a license.
Yeah. There's a lot in the appendix, you know. There's a lot there that could be.
Well, yeah, but you don't even need it, because the opening is from, you know, his combat with Sauron, and you know, so as long as you're in Lord of the Rings, you're good. You just have to package it that way, and he liked that argument. So we'll see.
Okay.
Additional tip for packaging that is presented as a coin, minted by Aragorn LSR2 in honor of his ancestor.
That's a really good idea.
The new, not Gondor, not Arnor, but the reunited kingdom of the Dunedain, represented by Elendil. That is fourth age coin. That's what it is. You know? That could be. Yeah, we gotta get him. Yeah, we got to get him into a call at some point and talk about all this stuff.
I think it'd be great if we started to have guests appear. You know, probably not for the entire episode, but you know, 10 to 20 minutes in our calls. And the other thing is, I think it'd be great to see a Shire Post stamp set from Mayor Sam Gamgee.
That would be good. I mean, like I said, they're not. Shire Post is not a sponsor of the channel, but hey, maybe at some point they will be. But anyway, guys, so the order this time, I mentioned this at the intro, is I'm going to go first, and then Matt, you are going to be in the middle. No, I'm sorry. No, that's not. What did I say earlier? I believe I said
John, Sid, me.
yes. Sid, you're going to be in the middle. Matt's going to be bringing up the rear. I want to make sure that I'm consistent on this. So I'm going to give myself the 3 minutes here to to intro my section here. Well, all of our section, but my topic. So this came from a question that I got on Quora just this last week. And last episode, we talked a lot about, in my section, the questions that we love, the ones that bring a certain sheen to our eyes and a smile to our lips and make us write more than 3 paragraphs. And we talked a lot about the types of questions we like, but I want to give a very specific example and highlight this question because I thought that it was interesting and not something that I see very often, which was a hypothetical scenario. I mean, I see hypothetical scenarios all the time, but a hypothetical scenario in which Sauron, in the Third Age, repented. That he truly repented, not like he did at the end of the First Age where he felt badly and he was humiliated and wanted to be let off the hook, but where he actually did what Eonwa had told him the first time to do, and that he traveled to Valinor and supplicated himself to the Valar and faced the music, which I said quite literally faced the music in this instance. And that he not only abjured his past evil deeds, but worked towards redemption and found forgiveness, which would be given to him. I have no doubt about that he would be forgiven if he had come in repentance before the Valar and he was sincere. But what of the One Ring? Would it still be evil? And I gave my answer, which after the intro here, I'm going to start the 30 minutes and I'll tell you what my answer was. But because it's what Tolkien would call fully in the realm of surmise, that there is nothing written about it, of the specific scenario, so we have to use our what Matt would refer to as our lore master powers to find the best response. There's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. I give my answer, but it's open for interpretation, and I'm curious what you guys are going to say. So let me go ahead and set it for 30 minutes. I almost used up the whole 3 minutes there. Okay, so my thought on this is, if Sauron truly repented, and whether it's Third Age Sauron or whatever, and Third Age Sauron is probably the version of him that we would least likely to imagine finding any sort of regret or any sort of remorse for his actions, because he seemed wholly convinced that he was correct and that he was in the right, as did Saruman as well. But this is about Sauron. What happens to the One Ring? Is it still evil? Would it still be dangerous for someone to pick up and to use even? Would it be redeemed with him? And I had to think about this long and hard. This isn't something that I just banged out an answer on very quickly. And my conclusion was that if Sauron can change, then so can the One Ring. And I base this on the fact that we know that the One Ring, he put, what Tolkien said, he put his power into it, the greater part of his power. But we would have to understand that it was really the greater part of himself, that the One Ring is the Lord of the Rings, that it is Sauron, that he is in rapport with it at all times, even when he is separated from it. It does not diminish him to be separated from it. Only its destruction diminished him. So my thought is, we know that it's sapient. We know that it is sentient. It is aware of its surroundings. It reacts to its surroundings. It is aware of the thoughts and the words and deeds of people that not only bear it, but people around it, as it called out to Galadriel, as it called out to Boromir. So I think that if Sauron can really change, then so can the One Ring. And that perhaps even in this scenario, it might be possible, if the ring was retrieved in this instance and brought to Valinor, that he could even be made whole again and become Mairon again. And there was another question that came in that was very, very similar that I want to briefly touch on. Was it what would happen to the ring if Sauron was thrust out into the void? And it's interesting because I said that, well, the ring would still be there and it would still contain most of his power and it still would be seductive and it still would be evil. And as Gandalf stated in the Council of Elrond, that these things have a way to be found. They have a way of being used, and it could only be used for evil. But like I said, if Sauron really can change, and I know Tolkien didn't speak about Sauron changing, he spoke about orcs, though. And I think, Sid, you spoke about this. I don't know if it was in the Council of Tolkien or if it was in one of our private conversations about how Tolkien talked about the ideas of an orc or orcs as a whole finding repentance and being cleansed in that way, that he can't imagine it happening, but that he has faith that it can happen. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys and just see, go ahead, Sid. I want to know your thoughts on this.
I asked to go first. No offense, Matt, because two of the things I have to say are directly supportive of what you're saying. Let me start with Tolkien. Not only did he say that these things ought to be interpreted by each reader, but he also went further than that and said each reader will have a different interpretation, and the interpretation that is true to the reader is what matters. So it's not a matter of convincing each other. It's a matter of what moves my heart. And when that happens, I tend to have two levels of response. And the first one is I'll think of a single quote and link them. And John, this is one that supports your view, but it's a quote you didn't mention. Gandalf said to Frodo somewhere in there, one of you could probably find the page faster than I can.
Possibly.
The ring and Sauron are one. So that clearly says to me that if the mind, obviously Gandalf is speaking to a level of mind because they're separate. Sauron's body is separate from the ring, and they're very far apart. But in mind, they are one, even when Sauron can't find the ring. And Sauron, the ring knows when Sauron wants the ring to stay hidden, and the ring knows when Sauron is calling it. So I think very clearly if Sauron did that true and deep repentance, that he would, that the ring would transform with him. The other point is I have a very strong argument that Sauron specifically can repent. If we go to the parley at the Black Gate just before the last battle, Gandalf offers Sauron an opportunity for repentance. Yeah. It's beautiful to take that as completely sincere, and Gandalf was always completely sincere.
And he offered the same to Saruman as well.
Exactly. So it makes sense that Saruman would be able to repent. He hadn't been evil for thousands of years and multiple ages. But even Sauron, clearly, I have to treat Gandalf as sincere. And if I want to write fan fiction about this, I'll just have Sauron get a change of heart in Barad-dûr and fly over and walk out the gate and say, okay, and kneel before Gandalf. That's the image. I believe it must be real because Gandalf can't make a false offer.
He can't, and neither could Eonwa, and that's why Eonwa said you have to go to Manwë, that I cannot pardon you. But Gandalf was not offering Sauron a pardon. He was offering him the road to redemption.
Yes, but that means redemption has to be possible.
Yes, absolutely. It is always possible. Matt, I'm going to come over to you in a moment. I just want to address some things from the chat room. So the comment here that I want to address was that evil is never really clearly defined. Morgoth was corrupt, but it's never clear why. So it is actually, and I know that Sid has made this sort of his area of expertise, and the road to, I mean, he had a article on Quora that you can find that's really wonderful called "The Path of Fallen Angels," and it comes mostly from ambition and impatience and wanting to be in charge, and that Morgoth wished to fill the void with all manner of life of his own devising. He did not have the patience to wait for the world to be created, and he wanted it all to be his thought, not God's thought. And in Middle-earth, he declared himself the Lord of Middle-earth and wanted to reshape it in his own image, not in the image of, I want to say Iluvatar, but also the image of all the other Ainur that had all had a part to play in its devising. So I would say that evil is clearly defined. It's just that you have to sometimes read between the lines with Tolkien. Matt, I want your thoughts on the Sauron redemption.
I saw that question also, and I agree. Both of you guys, one of our great opportunities for harmony. I think he does have the pathway.
I was kind of hoping we would have some kind of disagreement.
Well,
That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, like I've said in the past,
Yeah.
sometimes when experts like us, I mean, together you and we have probably over 100 years of experience, us three right now. Honestly, it's not exaggeration.
No,
So
it's not.
when people come to our show and they see a hard topic agreed to by people with this much experience, I think it gives a lot of people a lot of settling feeling like, wow, there's really some meaning and some
You're right.
consistency.
You're right.
You're
right. I was
That's what I'm saying.
I was just hoping for a different perspective.
Well, I do have a couple. I have
Okay.
a couple small deviated points. I was
Okay.
saving the best for last. Um, the Path of Fallen Angels to me is what I would call guided fantasy. When an author is really really good, especially like Tolkien, I do agree where there's a leeway, there should be artistic and can be some artistic movement, where people want to think and mean and feel in their hearts about things. And I do it myself. There's a lot of places in the Legendarium where that's true. But there's so much detail in Tolkien that it's so much of it feels like it's fully guided or semi-guided in a lot of ways, to the degree where Sid can write an article that's going to be in our book, about the path of fallen angels. And that's guided fantasy. You can have viewpoints about what this would look like in your own, but there's so many good, logical, canon-supported arguments in that piece that it feels more guided than just come up with whatever you want. I'll give you an example of that. And I use this in my articles sometimes when I'm talking about the fact that nowhere does it say that Gandalf is more powerful than Bilbo Pony. There's nothing that
Okay.
says that.
I know who you're channeling here.
We can make well I'm just saying we can make some deductions about people's power, things they can do, cannot do, based on 6 or 7 passages minimum about this kind of thing. And so it's kind of guided for me. I mean, I have a little bit different, not wholly, but a little bit different on a different opinion on some of this, because so much of it is so well sourced or can be connected and triangulated that it kind of leads you in a certain direction. That's all I'll say about that. Now, to the main issue here, we're really talking about soul fragmentation. If he repents, I believe that Eru or Manwë or whatever, since they're the decedent powers of the world, that whatever element was in the ring would leave the ring, unite itself with Sauron in order for him to be whole again.
I agree. I do believe that it is within the power, certainly of Iluvatar.
I had a poetic image for that. Sauron comes before the Valar and Manwë with genuine repentance, and he does not bring the ring. But once he repents, he calls for it and brings it and offers it to to the Valar. And then
I
pick
agree
up
with
with
that.
what you said, John. It's returned to him to make him whole.
Yes, I absolutely
On
believe
the
that
other hand,
that's in their power.
what if Sauron tried to repent and failed, or feigned repentance again? I think the Valar better darn well find the ring and toss it through the door of night with him.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think that he feigned repentance. I think that it was more like the first thing you said. He failed at repentance. He was told what he needed to do, and he let pride and fear overcome the correct path, and he tried to do good works in Middle-earth and to heal Middle-earth in the early Second Age to make up for what he did, but he never supplicated himself in the way that was required. I want your guys' thoughts, and I want to reply to something that came in through the chat room. Here it is. If you believe it's...
I'm having an audio problem on my end. I'll take care of it.
Okay. We can hear you fine. If you believe that Sauron could be redeemed, then that means the Valar failed to redeem him, so they're semi-responsible. And I especially want to hear Matt's thoughts on this, but I think that it's not one person's responsibility to redeem another person, even if they are angels. That's why you don't see Aula, the Valar, Aula, the craftsman, getting dragged for the fact that Feanor and Sauron and Saruman were all his students and all went bad. As a matter of fact, he was the one that helped redeem Osei, who had gone astray and had joined Morgoth, and that was not his Maya, that was Ulmo's Maya. So I believe that, when it comes down to it, I believe, and I believe Tolkien believes, that it's never another person's responsibility to redeem another person. A person has to want to redeem themselves. You can't force redemption. And the modern parlance was you have to want to be helped. You can't get help if you don't want it.
And that's totally in agreement with Catholic doctrine.
Yeah.
Actually, John, I wanted to present a very small item you mentioned, and
well, before you wait, hold on, Sid. Before you do that, I know you're having an audio problem, but that was all a question directed at Matt, actually, because I wanted Matt's thoughts on that.
I can hear you all again.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to say that I think when the moment that there is a feeling of repentance that's genuine, Manwë has the authority to act on Eru's behalf. He did it. He's done it a few times in the Legendarium already, and if he does that, I think whatever's in the ring leaves the ring and what I call reconstitutes with Sauron and makes him what you would call whole again, which means the ring. I don't think the ring dissipates. I think the ring just becomes gold.
Or whatever it was
worth nothing.
Made out of.
Yeah. Except there's one thing that you mentioned that's interesting, and that is if he reneges somehow, what happens to the ring? I don't know if that point that has any more power remaining enough to do any more of that kind of soul fragmentation.
And I'm glad you ended on the term soul fragmentation, and we'll get to you in a moment, Sid, but there was a question that came through in the chat that asked, what is soul fragmentation? And Matt, I want you to answer that since you were the one that brought up the concept.
Soul fragmentation is an aspect of necromancy in which the soul of the being, or in Sauron's case himself, can be suspended or entrapped to some inanimate object in order to provide Sauron, in this case Sauron, an anchor, a soul anchor to the world, in which if he is dissipated or killed, he doesn't really leave. He's kind of stuck because part of him is in the ring.
I think you're incorrect on that last part, because that makes it into a soul jar, or and that I think it wasn't an anchor to the world, because as one of the Ainur, he's already anchored to the world. And I think that is true. And I think that it's an anchor to the rings of power is what it is. It's one ring to rule the
I would
world.
agree with that.
Okay,
I would agree with that
Sid
too.
had something to say, and we have to get to him. We have about 13 minutes left in this segment, so go ahead.
Two now. One is, I do think the ring was not an anchor to the world for Sauron's spirit, because it was anchored already, but it might have been an anchor to his body, because when he had the ring on leaving Numenor, he lost his body, but could reconstitute his dark body very quickly. When he lost the ring at the end of the Second Age, it took him 1,000 years to re-embody. Because I would say because he didn't have the ring. So I think that the ring would have supported.
You meant Third Age there, right?
Third Age there, right?
Well, he lost the ring at the end of the Second Age.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the very end. And so when he was re-embodying it took him 1,000 years, the first 1,000 years of the Third Age, to re-embody. Very, very slow. And I think it was because he didn't have the ring. Going back to our other, I completely agree with the concept of soul fragmentation here. John, there's one thing that I want to correct. If I'm right, I want to correct you on. There was one being who Tolkien felt could not be redeemed or redeem himself.
Morgoth. Yeah, I mentioned that in the chat, actually.
Okay, and I just want to say that's one of the few things I disagree with Tolkien about. There is a Christian tradition that believes that Satan can be redeemed and even will be redeemed by the end of the time. And part of the job of being human is to teach Satan to do better than he's been doing. And I'm definitely in that camp.
Okay. I think that's a valid way of looking at it. Somebody in the chat said less of a soul jar. The term that got used in the chat is phylactery, which is really interesting. I don't think that his ability to constitute a body is directly tied to the One Ring, because even if he doesn't have it, he still has the power. He's still in rapport with the power. Losing the ring, physically being separated from it, does not make him less powerful. I think the reason that he didn't reconstitute himself for 1,000 years was because he was hiding. The Ainur are 100% whole without having a body. The way that it was described in the Silmarillion was that it is a raiment or garment, and just as you could cast off your clothes and be just as whole, so too could the Ainur cast off their raiment, their body, what they refer to as a fauna, and still be 100% whole. The body is so that they could be seen by the children of Iluvatar. So in the Third Age, when he constituted the body of a necromancer, it was what was referred to in the Silmarillion as a form of majesty and dread, to be seen and to be intimidating and to be frightening to others. I think that once the One Ring was destroyed, he no longer had enough power to make a body or to do anything, because most of his power was tied into that implement. But being separated from it doesn't weaken him.
I agree with the last point entirely, but something in the middle I disagree with. The description of the way that the Ainur and Valar embody is a general truth of the Valar of the light. But there are two exceptions. One is the Astari. Once they embody their bodies.
Speaking of incarnates.
Yeah, they incarnate, and damage to their body will damage their soul. And I believe the same is true with dark beings who embody. And this is why when Morgoth's foot was stabbed, he was lasting lame. And when
he had scars as well.
And Sauron lost his finger. He still only had 9 fingers.
That is true.
When he lost that body entirely. So my sense is that the body of those who have fallen into darkness, because they are no longer connected to the flame eternal, which renews life, the wounds last to the eternity of their own soul.
And I think that actually, I agree with that, actually. And I think that plays into why he could no longer take a fair form after the Akalabeth, was because he was so wounded by it, and that he was scarred and broken and beaten, and he was terrible to behold in his majesty, but he could not get rid of those scars. He could not become like Anatar. He could not become like Zigur, as he was in Numenor. Because, as you say, and I had never really thought about that in that exact sense before, Sid, so I thank you for that the damage to an incarnate's Hroa is a damage to their Feya as well. And I guess it's interesting, though, I mean, like, we see the remnants of Saruman, whose body withers to dust almost instantly. And I think that was Manwë doing that to prevent him from ever seeking or holding power again. And I think that in that sense, we could probably safely surmise that Saruman could never regain a physical form either.
I disagree with you, but I've got a fanfic novel which has him reincarnating about 2,000 years ago.
Okay.
And being very a good specific guy.
Oh my God, I know what you're getting at.
I think we're real close to the bullseye here. I have one main angle to take. It's interesting, I think, and that is the kinds of damage that Sid is talking about. I really wholly agree with. There's this link between the Hora and the Feya, and kind of damage that Sauron took when he lost the ring the first time in Numenor was not the same kind of what you would call damage, because he had the ring, he didn't lose it. He went back to Mordor. There wasn't any discussion really about how long it took him to reform. It just said that he went back to Mordor and took up his seat on his throne again. That was basically sounded almost immediate. But when he was killed, or when he was dissipated in the last alliance, and went through all of that and lost the ring at that point, it took him a long time to recover from that kind of damage. And I think there is a difference, and I think there is an effect on his power when he doesn't have it. And the reason I'm saying this is because there's a couple places in Lord of the Rings where Gandalf is very insistent that that Sauron needs to find the ring, desperately needs to find the ring to regain his form and to regain his full power. So they are linked.
He never said. Really, you're quoting the movie here. Be careful with that.
Well, I don't mean to talk about the movie. I'm not talking about the movie.
He never said that he needed to regain his form. He had a form. Gollum saw his form and described it, and as Sid said, he was missing a finger.
Yes, but the book also says that Sauron was bent on finding it again.
Of course, he was bent on finding it, and he doesn't want his enemies to have it.
Well, that's true, but he's in this pseudo soot form for a long time, from Dol Guldur onward, and I think that having the ring unified and having him reconstituted, since the ring has so much of his.
He had been in that form since the Akalabeth.
Yes.
Sid, we're not hearing you.
No, he wasn't, because he took his seat back up, and he was in form when he appeared in front of Elrond and Gil-galad in the battle where he killed Gil-galad, and so he was in physical form for that at that point.
Of course, and he was
killed in that battle.
But he, and I addressed this earlier. I don't know if you didn't hear me, but like I said, it didn't take him 1,000 years to put himself together. He was hiding for 1,000 years.
Oh, I think that he was hiding, because I think that was what he had to do.
But I want to.
He didn't have the ring.
Hold
on, let me finish.
Go ahead.
Let me finish. Go ahead. Because we just got in talking about how much of his Feya and Hora are in the ring. We just got in agreeing that there's a lot of him in it. Okay.
The greater
part. So if he doesn't have it, he's got a problem. constitute without it.
That's not true. But I'm going to address that in a second. But Sid's waving his hand. We're not hearing you, Sid. Still not. He's giving a thumbs down. I don't know what that means. I think Sid's having a technical issue.
Let's just keep going. But go ahead,
Okay.
John.
But from letter 131, which I just brought up. Oh, he just dropped out of it. Oh, no, I wish he hadn't done that. Okay, hopefully that is fixed. All right, we lost Sid momentarily. Hopefully he'll be back very soon. But from letter 131, but to achieve this, he had been obliged to let a great part of his own inherent power, a frequent and very significant motive in myth and fairy story, pass into the One Ring. While he wore it, his power on earth was actually enhanced. But even if he did not wear it, that power existed and was in rapport with himself. He was not diminished. Unless some other seized it and became possessed of it. If that happened, the new possessor could, if sufficiently strong and heroic by nature, challenge Sauron, become master of all that he had learned or done since the making of the One Ring, and so overthrow him and usurp his place. This was the essential weakness he had introduced into his situation in his effort, largely unsuccessful, to enslave the elves, and in his desire to establish control over the minds and wills of his servants. There was another weakness. If the One Ring was actually unmade, annihilated, then its power would be dissolved. Sauron's own being would be diminished to a vanishing point, and he would be reduced to a shadow, a mere memory of malicious will. But that he never contemplated nor feared. The ring was unbreakable by any smithcraft less than his own. It was indissoluble in any fire save the undying subterranean fire where it was made, and that was unapproachable in Mordor. And so great was the ring's power of lust that any who used it became mastered by it. It was beyond the strength of any will, even his own, to injure it, cast it away, or neglect it, so he thought. It was, in any case, on his finger. So what he's saying there, he's not diminished by it being separated from him. He's only diminished by it being dominated or destroyed. Sid, are we good? Can
you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Sorry, I log off. I've been hearing what you've been saying. Do you want me to chime in now, or did you want to finish up?
Go ahead, because I know you were dying to.
Yeah, I want to start with one really key point. Sauron lost his ability to appear in fair form like Anatar when Numenor fell. He was in that body. And when the whole island, including that body, was pulled under the ocean, his Fëa fled and somehow pulled off carrying the ring. This is all in Tolkien's letters.
Yes.
But even if he re-got the ring later, he could not appear in fair form. He couldn't do it at the end of the Second Age. And if he'd gotten it at the end of the Lord of the Rings, he would have enough power to rule through all future ages with no end in sight. I think that's a hint about something, and I just wrote about it on Quora. But he still would always appear as a Dark Lord.
Yes. We're actually out of time for this section, but I wanted to give you the chance to talk anyway because you had the technical snafu there. But no, I agree. It was the Akalabeth that robbed him of his ability to appear fair, and I believe it was because he was so damaged. The way that it was described in the Fall of Numenor was that even as it was happening, he was laughing. He knew he was going to be okay.
John, I got one comment before we move to the next segment.
Go ahead.
This might be an interesting point of difference between us. Without getting into it, I'll just say this one thing. You can respond if you want, but I've always rejected the idea that Sauron actual and Sauron ring, or that most of Sauron, Fëa and Hora, are in Sauron ring and not Sauron actual. Sauron, the reason is because Sauron is the one that's giving commands. He's on his throne. He speaks. He's the thinker still, even in the later Third Age. He's the thinking portion of him, and the ring portion of him is bound to whatever it can do within the ring. So I don't personally agree that Sauron actual is the minority part of Sauron.
It's not about being the minority part of Sauron. It's the fact that he put most of his power into the ring. That was the phrase that he used.
Yes, I agree with the power, but I don't think that most of his Fea is in the ring.
Well, what is Fea but one's own essence, and what is power but one's own essence? But we're going to have to we're going to have to table this.
That's fine, but I just mean that it's magic. It took a lot of magic for him to do it, but his soul is mostly in himself, not the ring.
Yeah, I just want to comment on one thing that came through the chat room, which is very interesting, is that Morgoth had permanent injuries from the Silmarils, from not only, he wasn't even really holding them, and his hand was burnt. They were in a crystal casket, and his hand was burnt just from holding them in the crystal casket, and his hand was forever blackened and in pain. And the commenter here finds it very strange that he wore them on his crown. And I'm actually planning on writing a very lengthy article about it. I'm not going to get into it here, but about Sauron's almost sadomasochistic desire to be burned. And I'll be speaking about that in probably in our book.
Can we comment on this now?
I know, because my thoughts are not really ordered yet. It's just something that I'm planning to write about.
I thought someone asked this question just now.
No, they just said that they found it strange that he would wear the Silmarils when they were hurting him.
Well, can I
go ahead if you can. I'm just declining to.
Yeah. Well, the crystal box wasn't going to block any light. And so that's why it burned his hands.
Well, it's not so much the light; it's the holy power of Arda that's doing it.
Well, I know, but the only way it can be explained.
No, Matt, wait, hold on. I know that you know. I'm clarifying for the audience.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know if I know. I'm just.
You know. I know that you know.
Well, I know the box was crystal.
Yeah.
And that light was a problem. When Karkaroth swallowed it, it completely burned him inside out.
Yeah, well, that was because they were hollowed by Varda. Before that, it wasn't, an issue.
Well, I know, but there was also burning. That's why his hands were burned. So there was a burning effect to some kind of maybe not heat. Light had a burning effect.
No. Well, when he mounted it was because he was evil. Because if you think about it, it didn't hurt Beren, it didn't hurt Luthien.
I agree.
I'm
not disagreeing with any of that. I'm just saying that when he mounted it in his crown, the crown was probably magical, probably crafted by Morgoth himself, and it probably blocked whatever there was by the way it was mounted. It was mounted in some kind of a casing where it wasn't exposing him to.
I disagree, and like I said, I'm going to write a whole thing about it. I think that he liked it. He made it out of iron. It was very, very heavy, and I think he liked having this heavy crown weighing him down with this burning sensation. And like I said, I have a whole thing about the weird sadomasochistic tendencies that Melkor has in all of his actions.
Makes a tremendous amount of sense.
Yeah. Well, before we get past the PG rating, we're going to move on to our next section here. So let me reset the timer here. We're going to set that for 3 minutes. And so that means, Sid, you're going to go, and I'm going to hit start, and you're going to intro your section here. Button. We don't hear you, Sid. Wait, let me stop the timer because we're not hearing him. Oh, we lost him. I believe Sid is having some technical issues today. So hopefully he comes back quickly.
Well, if he doesn't, we can swap places and just keep moving on with the show if you want.
He's coming back. He's just we're just waiting for him to turn his webcam on.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you. We can't see you. Yeah. Now we can see you. Okay.
There I am.
All right. Let me go ahead and.
My ring.
That darn ring. Let me go ahead. Okay, I reset the timer for 3 minutes. Go ahead and intro your segment.
Thank you. I can't imagine a more radical shift from the last topic. I couldn't create one. So we're going to a totally different space, both in that I'm going to talk about something fun and intriguing with no sense of evil in it, though some evil characters will be mentioned, and also because I'm actually leaving Middle-earth for something about Tolkien's writing. Tolkien, as probably many of you know, was a scholar of Old English and teaching Old English. There isn't a lot written in Old English. Anyone who gets to the graduate level in that topic has read every single original source. And there isn't a lot of Middle English, and knowing Tolkien, he must have read all of that as well. And there are a few ways that this links in. I'll give two examples. The first one is very brief. The odd name, the Red Book of Westmarch. Well, there actually is a yellow book of some location in Wales and another colored book in some location of Ireland that are real Old English books kept by families that had the family's history and stories and tales and legends of various forms, and also kind of like what people a century or two ago did in the back of their home Bible, the birth dates of every child born, the marriages listed for the family. So the genealogies that the hobbits like so much. So when he created in his imagination the Red Book of Westmarch as what he was translating, with Frodo having written Lord of the Rings and Bilbo having written The Hobbit and translated and written the Silmarillion, and Sam adding a bit at the end, there was a real Celtic model of that. I'm just mentioning that out of interest. Unless anyone has a comment about it, I'll reply.
I don't have a comment. I just wanted to point out that LM5 is in the chat room.
She is.
Yes, she just
Hi,
arrived.
Laurel.
Okay, but 30 seconds late left on the explanation of what we're discussing. Can't hear you, Sid. Oh, this is a. Let me just stop the timer here. There's a comedy of errors today. We're having such difficulties. It's just so strange that we've never had this issue before, where Sid suddenly can't be heard like that. All right, he's back. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay, so I'm going to reset the timer for a minute so you could finish up what we're discussing.
Okay, thank you very much. A key element of all Celtic writing in these books like the Mabinogion and the Yellow Book and so forth is that stories are told 3 times. And the first level is at the god level, then at the legendary level, and then at the human heroic level. And Tolkien used this over and over again. In the actual history, sometimes you had 4 or 5 different linked stories, same theme at different levels, because one book would have 2 of them, and a certain third one, someone else would have 2 different ones, but the themes were the same. And the simplest example that most people recognize is interracial marriages. At the highest level, we have Melian and Thingol. At the next level down, and that's obviously the divine immortal beings level, then we have Luthien and Beren, an immortal marrying a legendary figure that at the time Lord of the Rings was in the ancient past, and then it ends with Arwen and Aragorn happening and what the people of the early Fourth Age would think of as a heroic, real person of our day. And this repetition, same theme, 3 different levels, comes in over and over again. I got to this because I was thinking about Smeagol the other day and found he really fell 3 times. He fell in evil-mindedness when the ring not only grasped him with greedy desire, but turned him into a murderer, which, by the way, he felt guilty about forever after. That's in Tolkien's letters. So he still had a good side and felt guilty. But he was the ring tortured him with that guilt for 400 years.
Sid, I gotta cut in here simply because I said a minute, and we have to actually start the actual discussion. Then you got it.
Okay.
I'm hearing that echo, by the way.
I'm going to ask other people. Can you think of any thrice told stories in the Legendarium?
I can. Well, there's 2 things that come to mind, and one is the great kingdoms falling, the fall of Gondolin, the fall of Doriath, and the fall of Numenor, all through varying degrees of hubris seen in their leadership. But there was one, I am madly searching for the comment that was left to me on YouTube about, not in just the Legendarium, but going across all of his writing, that there is this theme of sailing across the ocean with a star on your brow. And we saw it with Earendil, we saw it with Elfwine, and also we saw it with I can't think of the name of it. I'm searching for the comment now. It's not the easiest thing to find because I get a lot of comments on YouTube. But it was, the question that came through was, why is this like such a theme of the star being on the brow? There was another non-related to the Legendarium story with a man with a star on his brow crossing the ocean. And of course, the Arundel had the Silmaril, and Elfwine brought the Red Book from Valinor to Britain. So it is a thing that is thrice told by Tolkien, if not necessarily in the Legendarium.
I can think of one example. One of the stories in the book of short stories is the story of a fairy king and a magical fairy piece that is hidden in a and you eat it. Now, there's no crossing the ocean. No, there is a crossing the ocean in that one.
Yes, exactly. I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah.
Where is my copy? I can't find the book. I just had it. I just read it on YouTube like a week ago.
While you're thinking about that, John, Matt, can you think of any triptychs for us to look at?
From Solicat?
I say, in all of Tolkien's work, can you think of any tales that were told 3 times?
I found it.
Well, the one that comes to my mind are the 3 main uses of Ainulindala. I call it Ainulindala. It's channeled by people who use it properly. Melian, Luthien, and Tom Bombadil. And the kind of power that they're channeling to make things, lack of a better term, go to sleep in peace, is so powerful. Probably the most powerful thing there is in which is channeling of the Ainulindala in order that things just rest. And I just find that super interesting. It's one of my favorite topics. You could make billions of dollars just having a show on Netflix just on Melian and Doriath alone. It'd be awesome. So that's the one I think of. But there is one other thing I was going to say, and that is this idea of a star This is harkening back to a naval tradition. I was in the Navy for a lot of years, and when you wish somebody farewell, you sometimes will say things like, "I wish you fair winds and following seas." And if you have a star involved in that for navigation, the old use of a star at night and a sextant and fair winds and following seas, there's no better sailing. There's no better sailing because there's no stress. All there is enjoyment. And you know where you're going. You don't have to move the sails around too much, and it's just easy. So it's a very peaceful way of saying um, that things are at peace and under control. I think that's kind of why Tolkien is using that. I mean, he's English, and he's got some Viking blood in him as well, and I think he is just kind of going back to some of the terms and concepts.
There's an Irish blessing related to that about and that ends with "and may star guide your path."
Smith of
Yeah.
Wootton Major was the story that we were thinking of, by the way.
And that's also where he also uses the term
You put the book
"the
down.
star shines on the hour of our meeting."
Yes.
Another
And thank you.
triptych. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say thank you for finding the Smith of
It
Wootton
took me
Major.
it took me longer than it should have, but I did find it was Smith of Wootton Major. But another triptych, and this is related to this.
Watching you try to find it, John.
Yeah, I'm sure it looked very funny. You need the Benny Hill music playing as I'm like, the Perilous Realm. The Perilous Realm,
Yeah.
whether it's called Fairy or whether it's called Amon or I think it was also called Fairy, but spelled slightly differently in Smith of Wootton Major. The Perilous Realm is another triptych as well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Now I have a really fun triptych for everyone.
Oh,
I'm going to name 3 characters, and I'd like you to tell me what they have in common.
Well, we're gonna have Matt do this because you already told me earlier.
No,
Great.
I left this secret. I have not said it yet. Oh, maybe
You did. You led with the secret,
okay, well, you can.
so I will
you can share
decline.
You can share your thoughts on it anyway.
Of course.
Let me just let me get the names straight. I'm forgetting one of them. Ase, Boromir, and Lobelia Sackville Baggins. What did the 3 of them have in common?
They're both narcissistic borderline personalities.
Well, hold on. That's unfair to Ase.
No, I don't know. He was the one that almost converted over to Morgoth, Melkor.
Well, yeah, but
I would say
you're close to the answer there.
true. This is one where they were only these 3 did something that was incredibly rare in Tolkien's work, yet did happen.
I would say they turned their life around before the end.
That's it. Bingo.
As far as I know, and I'd love to hear if there's anybody else out there, but Osei at the divine level, that he was, in case anyone doesn't know, he was a Maya, most powerful servant of Ulmo, Lord of the Seas. And
Yeah.
Morgoth really got his attention. He got really rough, and that's why we have horrible storms at sea. But at the suggestion of Howley, Weenan, his more or less bride, went and calmed him down and restored him to the good side. And then Boromir fell briefly to the temptation of the ring while the ring was in his presence. But when Frodo vanished and left, it was a very temporary thing, and the ring lost its power over Boromir's mind, and he repented. And Lobelia Sackville Baggins was simply a selfish, nasty person most all her life. In a way like Gollum. I would say she was a high society Gollum. If Gollum,
She was a tempest. She was a tempest in a teacup.
We want your spoons, precious.
but having spent some time in the lockholes, she did repent, and that was honored by everyone, including Frodo, at the end. So that's another triptych because it's a divine being, a heroic being, and an ordinary being.
Mm-hmm.
This kills me
Yeah.
because I had thought of another triptych and I just lost it in my head. It was there, and I was trying to keep it in the side of my head so that I could say it, and then it just flew out when I did the Gollum voice. I was like, I just had to put all my thought.
There was the three permutations of it.
Actually,
There's the three
John,
permutations of the Island.
No,
the
no, I had one that I was going to mention, and I can't remember it now.
Oh, okay.
can you remember even one character from it? If you remember one, we can probably rebuild.
See, I know I don't. It's completely gone. I don't even think it was so much a character thing as perhaps a thematic thing, and I can't. Oh, yes, here it is. The hero slaying the dragon is what it is. We see it. Bard the bowman killing Smaug and the Hobbit, Farmer Giles of Ham and the dragon in that story, and Turambar and Glaurung.
And Fram.
And what was that?
Fram.
I don't know what you're saying. You're getting cut off there.
Fram killed Scatha.
Oh, I wasn't counting Scatha or Ancalagon because they're not tied to larger stories. Like Ancalagon is just like barely a page, and Scatha is in an appendix. I'm talking about like a story where the climactic ending is a hero slaying a dragon.
Sure.
Going on an adventure specifically. And I mean, it's a little different in The Hobbit because it's Bilbo's story, and Bard was invented because Tolkien couldn't sell the idea of Bilbo slaying a dragon to his sons.
But this is exactly an example of how this Celtic idea of triptych does appear. Sometimes you get 5 stories because one person had 3, another person had the first one, and 2 different ones. It's an excellent example. But did Smith of Good Major? I don't think he ever killed the dragon.
No, Farmer Giles of Ham.
Sorry, no, but did Farmer Giles ever kill the dragon? I don't. I think he captured it.
He went on a quest. He went on a quest to stop the dragon.
It's a wonderful, light, hilarious story.
Oh, and if anybody hasn't read it, I highly recommend you seek it out. It's very amusing.
And it is absolutely hilarious, but I'm pretty sure it's also a very happy story because the dragon doesn't get killed.
That is true.
It just gets more or less tamed.
Well, that would be the lowest level then. Or perhaps it would be the highest level where we could believe that a dragon could be tamed and even a dragon could be redeemed. Which goes back to the first discussion that we had. Okay, well, we still have like 18 minutes in your section here. So, do we have any more triptychs, or can anyone in the chat perhaps come up with anything that comes up in examples of 3 in Tolkien's writing in that Celtic sense?
Well, one that's 3 or more and very interesting because it shows up in both dark and light versions is female characters, you'll see why I'm not saying women, who weave webs.
Okay.
And they're webs of deceit. And deceit, of course, is usually seen as negative, but not always. Melian wove a web of deceit to protect, am I going to get it right, Gondolin? Thingol's realm?
Doriath.
Doriath.
Doriath, yeah.
Doriath. And it was right next to webs descended from Ungoliant. Ungoliant is another such weaver. But Galadriel learned the skill from Melian and used the girdle. There was the girdle of Melian, and then there was the magical protection of Lothlorien, clearly learned from Melion.
I don't know how
And
clear that section is, because I think that it was initially due to the Elisar and then later due to her Ring of Power.
I think she used those, but I
Yeah.
think the skill of weaving deceit for protection.
I,
Uh,
I think a better example would be Luthien using her hair and her garment to ensnare and entrap and even seduce evil up to and including Morgoth.
Agreed. I was going to mention that one as well.
Thought on that. Sid, I have a divergent view on that. Um, if you look at what she does, her spells are related not related to entrapment and strangling and absorbing light, like Ungoliant is. Her spells are related to disorientation, to removal, to the point where the people who come into it or come close to the border of the forest walk their way back out of it again.
Well, that's why it's a
Like an
deception.
enchantment. Well,
I
it's a different. I think it's a different kind of. I think it's like a different kind of deception. It's not about strangulation or
Well, no,
binding
nobody
or
said it was.
darkness.
Yeah,
No, I just
okay. I didn't make myself clear,
just
but Matt, I agree with you. If we look at the difference between, say, the webs created by Melion and the webs created by Ungoliant and Shelob and the spiders of Mirkwood, the I would say the key word is devour. Capture and devour is the spidery
Yeah.
form, and deceive and turn away, distract
yeah,
is the harmless protection done by the light. But they do the evil.
that's where I was going.
Yeah, the evil and the good do stand opposite each other, next to each other in contrast.
It's not
Yeah, that's where I was.
necessarily related to what you said, but it sort of is in the contrast of how evil characters behave and how good characters behave in relation to each other. And found myself most recently speaking on this quite a bit, Sid, is what you notice is the good kings and the good leaders and the good stewards all ride out in front and fight battles, whereas the bad ones, and whether it's bad as in inept or bad as in malicious, it's all the same. They are all in the back or not even there at all. And I think that we see this dichotomy itself might actually be a triptych as well. Um, Gandalf and Saruman. Gandalf is always in the front lines. Saruman stays in his tower. Sauron and Aragorn is another one. They're the essential leaders. Or you could even just lump in Gandalf and Imrahil there. They were the ones to face. They were the captains of the West that faced down Mordor, while Sauron only joined when he had become desperate and it was already too late for him. And Denethor and Theoden is the third one that I wanted to bring up for your triptych, where Theoden rode out, and they not only was everyone behind him, but they couldn't physically catch up to him. That he was too fast and too mighty in his cavalry charge, and Denethor was craven, I would say.
I completely agree. I think I see another one, which is Sharky, the final name of Saruman, and Merry, Pippin, Sam, and Frodo
Mm-hmm.
in the uprising in the Shire.
Yeah. I
Well, Saruman had three forms. He was
Yeah.
first white, and then many colors, and then
No color at
Sharky.
all. Because that's what Gandalf said. You have no color now. I cast you out.
I missed the no color. Wow.
Yeah, he says you have no color. I mean, Gandalf was interesting when he revealed the coat of many colors and his ring. The first thing out of Gandalf's mouth was, "I preferred white."
And there's also another line at the same time where Gandalf says, uh, those who have broken something to
Mm.
discover its nature have left the path of wisdom. And since it was Isaac Newton who found he could make rainbows with prisms and saw that white light was the 7 colors of the rainbow, I've always thought of that as a little bit of a snip from Tolkien at material science altogether.
Oh, it 100% was taking something apart to understand it. Tolkien didn't agree with that at all. Which is interesting because that's the root definition of the word analysis, is destruction, to take something apart to understand it. Kind of puts us in our place, huh?
Perhaps when we fragment our thinking world around us, we're at risk of fragmenting our own souls. To tie this back to an earlier comment.
Well, we what we do, John, is we do a lot of careful breaking of things, breaking them down to be able to see what we can find in our association together over the last year plus. I mean, we've really gone deep.
We're coming up on 2 years now.
Breaking. Yeah, that's true. But by the act of breaking things down, look at some of the places we've gone, some of the tunnels we've gone down, and figured things out.
I think the difference between the root of analysis and the modern sense of what we do is we take it apart, but we put it back together, and we don't destroy.
Yeah,
right.
The philosophical language would be analysis and synthesis. The Tolkien's language would be analysis in service of subcreation.
Yes, 100% agree there.
100%.
That's why I've shifted in recent years, less answers on Quora and more stories on Archive of Our Own, because and actually similar to Tolkien, Tolkien began with, although he never published it, a deep scholarly analysis and translation of Beowulf. But then he went and there were creative parts of that made it unpublishable in his lifetime.
Yeah, and it's wonderful now that we can read it. The same could be said for the Green Knight as well. He was a little creative in his translation there too, and I think it makes it very wonderful. My favorite version of the Green Knight, and of course that only got published in 2010, somewhere around there.
And actually, that kind of thing wasn't publishable in any field, in any scholarly field, until around 1980. That was when feminist postmodern scholarship said that creative translation and creative synthesis were an essential part of scholarship. And so Tolkien was just a generation too soon to be able to publish it. Yeah. And I think that weighed very heavily. I know a lot of people who are both scholars and creative artists in some written form, and it's an agonizing place to be in terms of an oppression by society.
Is it another triptych to consider the Green Knight, Beowulf, and the Fall of Arthur as these translations that were either unfinished or unpublishable within his lifetime?
I would say yes. Yeah. They're all knightly figures, and they're all works that were too creative to be born in his lifetime.
There you have it. We even going off topic, we somehow hit the right road. Do we have any? We have 7 minutes on this section. Do we have any other triptychs?
Well, I would just say that that's one of the powers of Tolkien, because there's so much out there. Just shout out to him. And people can read this kind of stuff and come to the same conclusion. It's not accidental. Mm-hmm. It's not accidental.
And it's interesting because Sid lauded the application earlier and how, different people could come to different conclusions, and you had to come to the one that was correct for you. And then you had earlier spoken about, between the three of us, the nearly or perhaps in excess of 100 years of experience in Tolkien scholarship and all coming to a consensus, which doesn't always happen. We don't always, the three of us, all agree. But when we do, we're probably right. Now, you know what I mean? Like a round of applause for us when the three of us come together and agree on something, especially if it's something wild and crazy.
I don't know. I think even the wild and crazy stuff we tend to agree on. I mean, if we go back over all the months and articles, I mean, we don't have a huge percentage of stuff we disagree about totally.
Yeah.
Not really.
I think we're actually doing something more important than being right. I believe that we are each, and all three of us together, and all nine of us together, sub-creating.
Yes.
Tolkien's world, the way that Tolkien sub-created by creating it. He spoke of two very high forms of sub-creation. One, the creation of new worlds, not just writing novels in this world, but creating whole new worlds, as he did with the Legendarium. And the other is, I believe that what Galadriel understood magic to be, good magic, how does that appear in human life? And I think it really is two ways. One is artistic creation, and the other is leadership, to create a better world for our children. Or if your child is cat lady like me, for the children of
others.
Of the whole world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the children of Iluvatar.
Yes, exactly. And that's the real work of Tolkien, is to actually, this is what Le Guin writes about the value of Tolkien's work. Ursula K. Le Guin, a beautiful science fiction and fantasy writer in her own light, and deep scholar of Tolkien, who I think spiritually understood him in some ways beyond anyone else. She says that his whole oeuvre, his whole totality of work, is an inspiring guide for us to live better lives through the very process that we're doing of interpreting it as it applies to us. I'll tell a funny story related to that. I had an on and off friend for several years, and it wasn't working out well. But I actually ended the friendship when he said that the most inspiring thing in Lord of the Rings for him altogether was meat's back on the menu, boys. And I was like, okay, I'm glad you're inspired by that. If you want to be an orc, be an orc. Yeah. But I'm not interested.
I remember you telling me that story once, and I still just roll my eyes that somebody would say that and it not be a joke, you know. I just realized as you were speaking, Sid, that my biggest article that there it is. There's the subscription. You got it that time, Grumpy Boy. Thank you so much. The biggest article that I wrote, which is not really found on Quora. There was a private link to it in our subgroup and everything. But there's a triptych in there, and I didn't really think of it until just now. But there's actually two triptychs, one of which is Iluvatar, Ulmo, and Nienna, and the other are their agents, Tom Bombadil, Olorin, and Tur. And we see it on like a Vala, a Maya, and a somebody who straddles that line between human and elf. So it's at three levels there, and then it's two Vala and the actual biblical God in there as well. But it's I realized that I had written about this triptych and not even thought of it in that sense, that everything that happened in the Legendarium before Tur, him being the linchpin, and then everything after was engineered by the three masterminds of Iluvatar, Ulmo, and Nienna, and their agents, Bombadil, Tur, and Gandalf.
So each was a turning of an age into a new level of creation.
Yeah, it's interesting is that I think of if one was to make like a graph of the machinations of especially Ulmo, but also Gandalf and Bombadil, It almost would look like a bow tie pasta, with everything converging into Tur, all the houses of men, all the nobility and all of the virtues and everything coming into him, and then everything flowing out from him, to the point where in the Third Age, the only characters that are not related to him in some way, or his scions directly, are the ones that are like Bombadil, or like the hobbits, which are Gandalf's agents. You know, the patience, pity, mercy idea. And even that's a triptych: patience, pity, mercy.
I don't. Did Tolkien? I know
I have a dark triptych.
Oh yeah, I guess Tolkien did talk about patience. He didn't capitalize.
No, he didn't capitalize. He capitalized pity and mercy, but he put patience in there as well. I think that if he heard us talk, he might say I should have capitalized that. Real quick, Matt, go ahead, because we have 10 seconds here.
I have a dark triptych. I just thought of in a second. On Golian, Melkor, and Sauron.
Yeah. How about the Silmarils and the land, the sea, and the sky?
Absolutely. Now
Absolutely, that's a good one.
Celtic form. That would be just a triple item.
Yeah.
But that's a different kind of thing. But John, one more I might add to yours, at least propose. Mm-hmm. What about Gandalf and Aragorn as the next generation down of the ones you mentioned?
Well, yeah. I mean, Aragorn is like the next Tur, you know, in a sense that in his time everything comes into him and then flows out of him.
And if you look at the relationship of mentor and next generation, Gandalf down to Aragorn is the down to human hero level of your trip.
And it's interesting because he didn't only have Aragorn as his mortal student. He had Frodo, and he had Faramir as well. So he was, you know, and I know it's one of your favorite quotes. It's one of my favorite quotes, and I know it's one of Matt's favorite quotes, where Gandalf says, "For I am a steward too. Did you not know?" Okay, Matt, I'm going to give you the 3 minutes here for you to intro your section. We actually don't know what Matt's going to talk about. I knew what Sid was going to talk about, and you guys knew that I was going to talk about the ring at least. But go ahead. We're starting the 3 minutes. Matt, go ahead.
I don't think we talk very much. Anybody really talks too much about the lamps of Arda, the lamps of the Valar that were created to give light. And by the dating that I figured out and other people have figured out, we're talking about Valiant year 1900 when they are lit and when they're constructed by Aule. I wrote an article that was featured at Lore Master. For those of you who don't know that, that's what I go by on Quora. But I put one out today. It's been for a while, a long time. Some old thoughts even from years and years and years ago before our group started. And I posted it today, and it got me thinking about the fact it's not very often talked about. There's not a lot of detail. However, there are things that can be gleaned from things that were said in his works, and I wanted to kind of talk about it to find out what kind of harmonies, what kind of unification we have of our minds on this. I think it'd be something very interesting to talk about people, and it's something people don't really ever hear about or get exposed to. The answers for this.
Okay. All right. I'm going to set it to 30 minutes.
Yeah, thank you. It's a great topic. I need to take a 3-minute break to take care of my body.
Okay.
I'll be back here.
Okay. Well, do you mind if I start while you're talking?
Please go ahead with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, so I've started the timer. So yeah, I think that honestly, it sucks that there's not much to say about the lamps, because it is an incredibly fascinating idea, and I think that it tickles people's fancy I know one of the, and I think we talked about this a few episodes ago, the topics that we get tired of, and one of them that one of the questions that I find tiresome is about the Arkenstone and whether it's a Silmaril. And I always point out that there's no way that it could possibly be a Silmaril, but I had a question, and the answer was no. But it was a fascinating bit of imagination. Somebody asked, "Is it possible that the Arkenstone could have been a piece of the Northern Lamp?" And I thought hard about it, and I came to the conclusion that unfortunately it was impossible for the Arkenstone to be a piece of the Northern Lamp, but it made me happy to see somebody thinking of the lamps, because it's a topic that even Tolkien was in the process of disavowing in his old age, when, in the section of Morgoth's Ring called Myths Transformed, none of which I consider to be necessarily canon, but they are late ideas that he had that may have, had he all the life in the world and all the time in the world, been able to weave into some sort of story. And one of them was that there were no lamps and that it was just elvish mythology. And that's the crux of it, is that the Silmarillion is at its heart a collection of elvish lore. And because the elves don't know much about the lamps in this time before they were awoken, then therefore we don't know much about it. And that it really can capture our imagination in a way. Like I said, I love when people ask me about the things that are barely touched on in the Legendarium, because it gives us the opportunity to use our imaginations.
I have three thoughts, all affirming right away. One is John Gardner in his New York Times book review of the Silmarillion when it was released said, Tolkien has given us a Bible. The question is why? And for those who do know the Bible reasonably well, I'm talking primarily here about the Old Testament. It is a set of fragmented stories spanning thousands of years with themes coming back over and over. It's not like a novel. There's no continuity of character. And Tolkien clearly had that in mind when he wrote the Silmarillion. It was we call it the Legendarium, but to be precise, it was a mythology, a legendarium, and a history. And this is how biblical scholars think of the Hebrew Bible, which Christians call the Old Testament, where things like, the Garden of Eden obviously is considered a myth, and the fall, and Abraham is at the border of, is he completely mythic, or is he a legendary man where he existed but we know very little. And as we get to Moses, there almost certainly was a historical event of Israelite slaves leaving Egypt, and everything else is made up. But then as we get down to the Book of Kings and the prophets, these are real stories of real people. And that's exactly the model that Tolkien followed in writing the Silmarillion, and giving us a mythos, a legendarium, and a history, which is the three levels of triptych.
It all comes back together, and with apologies to Matt, because I feel like we may be getting off the topic of the lamps here briefly, but I wanted to affirm what you said there. Sid, you might have seen I was reaching for this book, The Ring of Words, which my friend Alice got me this past Christmas. And by the way, Alice is in the chat and said that a phrase to describe it, manufactured folklore, which is exactly what the Silmarillion is. But in this book, which is partially about Tolkien himself as a philologist and as a wordwriter, but then the greater part of it is word studies of words that he used and why he used them. And it gets into why he used the term legendarium. He did not invent it, although it was considered archaic in his time. But I'm just going to read a very brief passage here. But legendary itself would not quite do, as it is usually denoted a physical object, nor would mythology, as many of his writings were too historical to be described as myths. In the end, he settled on legendarium, a word which, although not yet recorded in the Oxford English Dictionary, was current in various other European languages. So it's interesting how you mentioned mythology and history, and with legendarium being in the center of it, because it is sort of the compromise of the two. In the historical sense, at least.
Yeah.
It's actually a lineage found.
I gotta ask you to not eat, Sid, on camera.
Uh, it's actually a fact of every literate and most non-literate oral cultures that they have three levels of what they believe the past was. That there's a past radically different than our own, more powerful than our own, that we call mythology. There's a past similar to our own, but also somewhat different, that has beings more powerful than anyone we know now, that we would call legends. And then there are historical figures who may have some legendary stories attached to them, like Abraham Lincoln and the chopping down the cherry tree kind of thing.
Washington.
I'm sorry, that was Washington.
Yeah.
There's Lincoln's one was walking 15 miles to return 3 pennies that weren't his own. Things like that. Or Newton being hit on the head by an apple. Those are historical with a touch of legend. And those three levels of how we think about, how we imagine our past to be, that's a universal human trait.
Yeah, and it's funny because like the Newton example is interesting because it came from his thought of gravity, and he thought gravity is why an apple falls to the earth. And somebody named Ripley, who had a series of factoids, which are things that sound like facts but are not, called Believe It or Not, and usually it was not because he was usually wrong, said that he got hit in the head with an apple, and everybody sort of ran with it, and that is a legend, where it is something that has a grain of truth to it but is not actually true. And that, I think, that describes Tolkien's work. His literary conceit was it's a mythological past, but he wrote it in a historic sense, and that it becomes a legendary. And because, yes, there's a grain of truth to everything that he wrote. It didn't literally happen, but if we could be like Sid and live our lives as if it were true, then we'd all be happier. But like merry old England is what was said in the chat room here. But Sid, did you have any thoughts specifically on the lamps?
I can't hear you guys. I'll be back.
Oh,
I'll fix
odd.
my sound and be back.
Okay. That's odd. John,
let me go through a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let me go through a couple of things that we do know about it, just to stimulate some conversation about it. I understand that people think there's not a lot out there, and there isn't, but there's some beauties. So let's talk about them real quick. Let's see here. We know that the two towers were named Iluin and Ormal. They're northern and southern. They were designed to cover the world with an even amount of light, so they were evenly spaced on a flat Earth from each other. The world is flat and has no curvature, which means there's no impeding the view from hundreds of miles away. And the lamps are in-world and not set outside the world, meaning there is no atmospheric interference from light upon the land as it just disseminates.
And you got you. Wait,
passages
I'm
from
sorry to cut in. I just wanted to. I'm sorry, Matt, but I wanted to say this before I forgot because I thought you'd find it amusing that now you've gotten me actually almost on your mode and thinking about size. And I don't comment too much about size unless it's relativistic, but I will say in the relative terms that if these lamps coated the entirety of Arda in an even light and were not impeded, then that says that they were taller than any mountains that were around.
That's where I'm going with this. So hold on. I want to just go through, even if I'm doing my section right now. I just wanted to give a couple more points so we actually have something to think about, because that's kind of what I wanted from you guys, like John, to think about some of these interesting things. In the Silmarillion, it says, quote, "The light was as of the sun, but gentler and steadier. And they shone upon the earth and upon the seas and upon all things that were. And darkness fled before them. And the shadows dwindled and crept away." Later on, it says that that they were taller, that the lamps were taller than the mountains of the latter days. Now, in the latter days, the tallest mountain was Caradras at 35,000 feet. That's about 7 miles.
Tanaquetil would be the tallest mountain.
In the latter days.
Tanaquetil didn't cease to exist in the latter days. It was just moved.
And what's your recollection of height of Tanaquetil?
That it was the tallest peak in all of Arda, and that Manwe could see the entire world from there.
So, if you're saying the latter days as being second age, oh, I see what you're saying.
I mean, perhaps we could say that Caradhras is the tallest mountain in Middle Earth, but not in the whole entirety of the world.
Mountain was taller than the mountains of the latter days. Do we have a size? I don't think we have a size for Tanaquetil.
No, but it was called, as I said, the tallest peak in all of Arda, and that's where Manwe's throne is.
I was looking at this and thinking that this passage was talking about what was in Middle Earth proper, where the tower, where the lamps were.
Well, like I said, if we're talking about I would agree that Caradhras is the tallest mountain in Middle Earth, just not in the entirety of the world. Right. And by the way, just to give you Laurel's thought on this, Laurel's thought here is that the lamp was in the Sea of Helkar, and that she believes that was broken, the magic is what imbued the elves with their magic, and that's why when they awoke there, they had their magic. And I think that's a lovely thought.
The other thing is that if we're talking about Caradhras, that the shadows would have been interesting because from their position, they don't change their hue or their brightness. It's also said that they're just even constant.
Sid wants Sid, I'm sorry, Sid has been waving his hand. Let's give him a chance to speak.
Were the two lamps over Aman, over Middle Earth, or over the whole world, including Aman and Middle Earth?
This was during the spring of Arda, and it was before the marring of the world, so there really only was one continent, and it was Middle Earth. Aman was broken off and pushed out to the uttermost west during the First War.
That's correct, and that's why I'm using Caradhras as the highest peak in that part of the world.
Well, I would argue that Caradhras did not exist at that point. That is a mountain of the latter days, because the most of the mountains were raised by Melkor. I would say that there probably weren't a lot of mountains at that time.
I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just what I'm saying is that Tolkien says that it was in narrative form, that to give you an idea, the reader, the idea of how big this was, he says that they were bigger than the mountains of the latter days.
Yes, so he's saying that exactly what I was saying, that he was bigger than the mountains. My only disagreement is saying that Caradhras was the tallest mountain in the world. I would agree that it's the tallest mountain in Middle Earth, but the tallest mountain in the world would be where the king of the world, Manwe, sits and overlooks everything. and that is
I'm
Tanaquetil.
not disagreeing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have two thoughts to add on that point. One is that I believe actually that many of the mountains were raised by Aule, and it was Melkor who overturned them into the sea, trying to destroy the world again and again. So the mountains came because of the battle, but Aule is cited as being one who kept creating essentially continents with mountain ranges in order to beat out Morgoth's effort to destroy the whole world and bury it in the sea.
I
The
think
other,
I think well, let me comment on that. I think they're both true. I think that they both created. We know that he created Orodruin, Melkor, that is, and he created the mountainous, the blocky, fortress-like enclosures of Mordor, Hithlum, and the Chrysagram. But I would agree that Aule was also creating mountains and that Melkor was casting down as much as he was raising up. And before you go on, there's a question in the chat for you, Sid. Grumpy Boy was asking specifically about the screen you have behind you, the beautiful carved screen, and is just asking of the genesis of that. Is it something that you made, or is it something that you purchased?
it's actually not carved, it's bamboo woven. So
It's well, okay.
each panel is a radial of bamboo. And I don't know if they're found anymore, but it was from Pier 1 in the 1980s.
Unfortunately, Pier 1 is gone. They're no longer in business, but
if you look up traditional, either Chinese or Japanese bamboo screen, you may find one.
yeah. And yes, Alice, we had a Pier 1 out here too, and I remember getting my mother a gift card for there once for Mother's Day, and she bought like one thing. I was like, I gave you a $50 gift card and you bought this wooden fish. It must have been an expensive wooden fish. But anyway, I'm sorry, Sid, go ahead. Just because there was a question for you, I wanted to give you that.
Thank you for that. And the others, if we go to the first of the 10 books published by Christopher, there's a drawing by Tolkien, his first image of the shape. Can you hear me?
No, I'm confused by what you mean by 10 books.
Well,
History of Middle Earth.
Are you talking about History of Miller? Oh, okay, because there's 12 of those.
Oh, okay. When I bought them, there were only 10.
Okay. Oh, yeah, the last two are really good.
Yeah, I hope I live long enough. Anyway, in book 1 of the History of Middle Earth.
So you're talking about the Book of Lost Tales, then?
Yes. There's an illustration drawn by Tolkien himself, his first vision of the shape of the world, that I think clarifies what we're saying about the heights of not measurable, but relative heights. And it's a fascinating image. The world is a ship shaped like a long Viking ship, sailing on the outer seas, where only Ulmo goes of all the Valar. And the oceans of this world, the Atlantic and the Pacific and all of that, are like swimming pools on the deck of the ship. That's how big the ship is.
I'm actually gonna do a favor to you, Sid, and to the people in the chat. Just very briefly, is I'm going to try to put that on the screen briefly. I have to go to a different scene for this, so I'm going to come over here and do it. But there we go. That's the drawing that Sid is speaking about, for anyone who was wondering. All right,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
It's okay. Now we're going to come back over here.
If we look at the details of that, Tanaquetil is at the western end and is the highest point, and is where Manwë stands, where Manwë and Elbereth Barda stand together, because they enhanced each other's, and he can see everything in the world, and she can hear everything in the world when they're together. Which would then place the lamps on the port and starboard sides of the world, shining down on the entire world.
And
And
it's been brought up in the chat room that the drawing is and the concept is similar to the firmament of biblical lore.
yes, and also the notion that the world was created, but when God broke open the sea to raise land upon the original sea. And so if we go with that vision, and this is something Tolkien rejected in his final years, but I don't agree with everything Tolkien did in his last years. I do really believe that the world was shaped like that until the fall of Numenor, when it was made a round ball and the prow of the ship in the west was taken out into the heavens a bit beyond Venus.
Yeah. And I agree with you, Sid, with what you said about myths transform from Morgoth's Ring being some of his last ideas. And I there's a few people, I'm not going to put anybody on blast, I'm not going to name any names, but there's a few people on Quora who I feel are beholden to every idea that he had, even if it conflicts another idea that he had. And there's a few people who specifically are so attached to myths transform that they insist that it's canon, even though it was not only published after his death, but never put into any stories. And even the subject, the title of the section is Myths Transformed. It's not like Laws and Customs of the Eldar, where it's giving us additional information. These are ideas that he had but never implemented. And when I spoke about them once, somebody said it sounded almost like he was trying to take the magic out of it, that he was taking the Silmarillion and making it more mundane, which I think would have been an error. And that's kind of the danger of playing with your story for too long without actually publishing it.
I see, and I agree with you, and I have two nuances to add to that. One is I feel that as he got older, there were certain battles he gave up fighting, like the world can't have ever been flat because we have fossilized dinosaur bones and so forth and so on,
Yeah.
as if Eric couldn't have planted some dinosaur bones when he pulled down Numenor. you know? So
Well, I
I've
have a comment on that.
go ahead.
I comment on that. I don't think that the world was actually ever flat. I think what Tolkien is talking about is that the human perception at one time thought it was flat. It was always round. And when he says that the world was changed and became round, he is talking metaphorically about the human awareness of science, and at that point, the history of the world then became round as a matter of perspective. I think it's a metaphorical, philosophical.
I think you're getting too into an allegory here, and I can't agree simply because of the way that it was described that Iluvatar broke the world and reshaped it, and that new lands were created, and that some lands that existed were destroyed, such as Cuiviénen, which no longer exists because of the way that the world was now curved, and that the fact that Aemon was sundered from the world, and that it's out in Ilmarin, and that there is a straight path that the elves and the Maiar could take to get there. I can't take it as anything but literal that it was once flat and that it was changed in the Second Age.
This is resolved by Tolkien himself, in that when he wrote the Silmarillion, that part of the Silmarillion, he meant what you just said, John. But in his later years, he adopted the other view and said the world was always round.
Yeah.
And he then said that Arda was what we now call the solar system. So he changed his view there. But there's an interesting point, actually, Matt, it relates to something else that you and I did in private dialogue on Quora this week. When we have things that in the published work, which is earlier, says A, and then a later work which was not published. Now, if neither was published, the general rule is later supersedes earlier.
Yes.
If both are published, the rule is later supersedes earlier. But when one is published and the other isn't, I believe we have a choice. I also think that in terms of what we were saying about uh, the last two qualities of change, one was succumbing more to materialist science and saying, okay, the world was always round, it had to have been. And also succumbing to darker and darker images, like, Matt mentioned a couple of months ago how Feanor was depicted as more and more evil. Those are symptoms found in almost every great thinker who continues his work into the years where he knows he is dying.
Leaf by Niggle.
Say again?
Leaf by Niggle. I have to finish my painting. I have a journey to go on that I cannot delay forever.
Exactly. And it even happened to I'm not remembering the physicist who died recently, English,
Stephen Hawking.
lived in a
Stephen Hawking.
yeah. Stephen Hawking went off angle into a very if there are aliens, they must be evil.
Yeah, I remember him saying that. But Matt, I want to point out, and the discussion here was of the lamps, that if we're going by the version of the legendarium that From Myths transformed in his later years, where the world was always round, it was never flat, then there were no lamps.
Or they couldn't have done what they
Yeah,
did.
I mean, and he said that in that the lamps were a lore from either the elves or from the men of Numenor to explain things that they didn't understand.
Or there's another possibility. Some of the things that Matt said earlier imply that the light of the lamps was not what we know light to be. It was more like air or water than like light.
Because there were no shadows, yes.
Yeah, it didn't have to travel only in straight lines.
Yes.
It kind of, and this is also Tolkien's notion of darkness. Good darkness is just the absence of light. It's the backdrop of the stars.
Mm-hmm.
But evil darkness is a material shadow.
Fear.
We already had this last month when we talked about Balrog.
Mm-hmm. That was 2 months ago, but yes. 2.5 minutes left in this section.
I'll bow out.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so we know from the passages that these, if we're going to ballpark the height of these guys, in the article I wrote, I approximated something like 9 miles, at least a couple miles higher than Caradros. But where they're positioned and the maps that are drawn and the diffuse illumination of where they're positioned being kind of in a 25% mark in the middle, where if you're in dead center, light is going to be diffuse, but it's really weird because when you're in the middle, there's not going to be very many shadows. But the farther you go out east or west, the more you're going to have constant shadow, because they don't get brighter or dimmer. They don't set. They don't wane. They don't wax. It's just constant shadow in a certain geometric pattern. If you were to see it all, in the outer areas of east and west, and but when you're at 9 to 10 miles, I did some math on this and some geometry, and cross-checked my work online. If you're 2,000 miles away from dead center, which is about where the north and south was, 2,000 miles north and 2,000 miles south is where these two were positioned. You can only barely see them, even on flat Earth. It came out to about 0.3 degrees of inclination. So imagine barely being able to see low-lying clouds at 10 miles high. That's the average on Earth's atmosphere. 2,000 miles away, you'd barely be able to see it.
I want to point out that at this point in the story, there are no such things as clouds.
Yeah, I'm just giving you an idea of how far away and how small something that's even 9 or 10 miles high would be seen. But this makes sense because the way he's describing the shadows and this twilight morning kind of sunlight and the long shadows and everything makes some sense. And if it's, I did some work on if it was 9 or 10. I did 9 miles. They were described as pillars. So by ratio of 12 to 1, a lamp pillar of 12 feet high and 1 foot across, which is typical. Um, if you had a 9 mile high lamp, the base of it would have to be, it came out to 3,700 feet wide, in that proportional ratio. So we're talking about some very, very heavy. I even figured out the weights. I won't
Okay.
get into
Well,
that.
let's
But when they
let's.
fell,
We're out of time,
but when
so
they
just
fell,
quickly
but when
wrap
they
it
but
up.
when they fell, they really made a huge impact. And I was
Yeah.
wondering if any of you have ever thought about what clues Tolkien actually gave us to figure out roughly how tall these might be.
Well, you know me, and you know that I don't care how tall they were. I only talk in relativistic terms, and that's what I said earlier. They were bigger than the mountains. That, as for how much bigger, it doesn't matter to me. They were big. I don't know if Sid has a comment on it, but
Not about the size, but I
yeah,
think there's a really beautiful thought here. If what Matt is saying is true, not only would they be barely visible, they would be right at the horizon,
yeah.
which means the light that flooded the world would be the light of either dawn or evening.
It was described as a twilight, so that yes, that tracks.
We
It was
know
described as a
you
twilight, but it
got
was also coming from the north and the south. It was coming from the north and the south at the same time.
Yeah.
like dawn and evening at the same time, but the elves awakened in the north and they love twilight. So perhaps the essence of
Well, they love
that elf.
starlight.
No, they particularly love twilight. They particularly love when the stars first came. Well, there weren't any stars back then. That was before
The
Albert
star.
created the first.
Well, I mean, they awoke when there was stars because after the lamps were cast down, Varda made the stars so
Right.
that the elves would be able to see when they did
Exactly.
awaken.
They loved the twilight when the stars first appeared, which is they loved when they awakened.
Well, I no, they woke. It was nighttime. There were no lamps. There was only stars. That's why I say starlight. The constant twilight was the spring of Arda, but that had ended at that point. We are out of time. I wanted to tie it back to Sid's thing real quick, because I just thought of this. Is that Morgoth tried to make his own triptych, and it was denied because he cast down the light twice, but he failed the third time. He cast down the lamps, he cast down the trees, but then they created the sun and the moon, which were far beyond his reach and his influence, and he could not get his triptych. He could not repeat it a third time.
Because in becoming material and dark, he had lost his power
Yep.
to ascend to the higher airs.
Absolutely.
That's a,
Yep. And he could not become like Elwing or like Aryan or like Tilion. He could not take to the skies like that.
and actually, Matt, a question for you. Is there any connection between the light of the lamps and the light of the two trees? Or was the light of the two trees a totally new creation?
It was a new creation because the trees waxed and waned in a
Yes.
7 hour, a 7 hour waxing and waning period. The lamps were constant and steady according to the Silmarillion.
Yes.
And what's interesting about that is when you have shadows, you're in some part of Middle Earth, you're going to wake up every morning, and the shadows are never going to change. Nothing's ever going to
Yeah.
change. And you were also right about the declination issue. If you're 2,000 miles away, it's going to appear to be a constant sunrise on one side and a constant sunset or sunrise on both sides. And that's just really cool to think about how much light that is. And the last thing I'll say about this real quick is that I don't know if most people know, but the amount of lumens that the sun has when it first peaks, the very first peak in sunrise, is 400 lumens. So if you're talking about a little bit of rise above just that bare peak. You're talking. I estimated at about 700 to about 800 lumens for both lamps, north and south.
I'm not sure that you could
Because
use.
Tolkien says they're both like the sun.
Okay, I'm not sure that you could necessarily use that comparison because what he said was that they were different from the sun. He used the sun as a comparison, and he said that
They
it
were
is
gentler.
yes, exactly. But like what Sid said, that because there were no shadows, that they weren't what we would, I guess, refer to as photonic. That the light was almost like a maybe the word that Sid used was a liquid, but maybe like a heavy gas that finds its level and spreads everywhere and gives you that constant twilight. Go ahead, Sid, real quick.
Luminiferous ether. Look it up.
Okay, that's yes,
Real scientific concept.
yes, absolutely.
That's all true to where they were living, but when you go farther than 2,000 miles to the east and west, the position of the two lamps starts to create long shadows in places that light doesn't get to very easily, which is consistent with the way Tolkien described some of Middle-earth.
Yeah,
time.
but as you yourself read from the paper that you were looking at, there were no shadows in that point.
In the place where the elves and most people lived in between, yes.
There were no elves or people when the lamps were there. There was only the Ainur.
Yeah, I meant from the Ainur's perspective, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there wasn't a lot of land
by the
either.
way,
By
the way, something came up. Something came up real quick for the point of the order here.
Okay.
The lighting of the trees was in Valiant year 3500, and 1,050 years later, in 4550, the elves awoke. So they awoke under the light of the trees.
They awoke under the stars. The trees did not light Middle-earth. They only lit the Undying Lands.
Yes, they awoke during the time of the trees.
Yes, during the years of the trees, but the calendar was used. Yes, but the trees' lights did not reach Middle-earth.
Now,
Very good point, John. But I'm just saying, as far as the timeline was concerned, that's when it was.
Yeah.
Two final notes from me. One is we have another triptych.
Yes.
We have the lamps, the trees, and then the sun and the moon.
That's absolutely
and
true.
I'll go.
Love it.
I'm going to leave you guys with a question. I'd love to, anyone who's listening can tag in the comments. Is it possible that the two lamps were one male, one female, and they had a kid, and their child is found on Narnia as a street lamp in the forest?
I think C.S. Lewis would have loved that idea. And
No,
Tolkien
but
would have
the
hated
lamps
it.
did have a different. The lamps had a different hue to them. Iluwin was a cool, brilliant whitish blue color, and Ormel was a goldish, warm color, very similar to how the two trees were made.
Yeah. And the sun and the moon were specifically the children, the son and the daughter of the trees. But I know I love the cheeky reference there that the street lamp in Narnia, or the entrance to Narnia. So before we end, actually, I believe I wanted to remind you, Matt, you wanted to correct something from last month about the direction of Angband.
Oh yes, I wanted to give
Because you texted me about this.
For his better memory than mine. I was saying that the position of Utumno, that Angband was in Copenhagen, and I had my memory wrong. My positioning has Angmar in that position. John, you were
and
correct.
I fully agree that's Angmar, yes, or the realm that was Angmar.
Angmar in Copenhagen was what I was thinking.
Yeah,
and your positioning for Angband being out, was it Angband or Utumno? I think it was Angband.
It definitely Angband, because Utumno we never really got a good location for.
Angband is almost exactly where Iceland is. You're correct.
Yep. Yeah. Because I was saying it has to be Iceland, but I think Angband, Angmar, it's totally understandable to conflate the two.
Well, anyway, I just wanted to say that we were hovering around the truth and
Yeah.
didn't find it.
So I got a text from Matt, and he was like, "I want to bring this up on the show," and I only just remembered it just now. I was like, "Let me give Matt the opportunity to bring that up." But anyway, guys, we have had a wonderful time here. Before we say goodbye, and remembering that there will be links in the description to all of these things that we're going to plug. Matt, why don't you start off with your plugs?
You mean my plugs for things I think are cool?
Or things that where people can find you?
Oh, yeah. I'm again on Quora. For those of you who are watching, we are the leadership team. The three of us are the leadership team of what we have formed on Quora as the Nine. We are a writers consortium and consultancy firm, and so this is who we are here on YouTube. I go by Lore Master, and Sid and John go by the names that you see right there on your screen. And we're the only ones that really do this kind of thing on Reddit or Quora, so we're kind of unique, and this is our footprint here on YouTube. So thank you for stopping by and listening to the show.
And loremaster.com, link in the description. Sid?
I'd like to throw out 3 links. I'm Sid Camp on Quora with about 5,000 Tolkien answers out there and growing. I write Tolkien fan fiction at Archive of Our Own, known as AO3, and that's Sid Camp at Archive of Our Own. And I want to also recognize Lore Master 5, also known as Laurel Callahan, also known as, I believe, Almariel. Is that right?
Almariel, yeah. That's the Elvish name that I christened her with a while ago.
Let's throw her link in as well, because
okay. I'll put that in there.
Related to what we do is just amazing, and so glad you're here, Laurel.
By the way, Sid, you're selling yourself very short by saying that you have 5,000 answers. That did not sound right to me, so I just looked it up. Sid has answered 11,000 times on Quora.
I said 5,000 on Tolkien.
Did you do 6,000 on other subjects?
This is very rough. I could be off by a couple thousand in any direction, but it's roughly 5,000 on Tolkien, 5,000 on Buddhism and spirituality, and 1,000 on anything random, including the occasional mathematical equation.
Okay. Well, let's just say that that Sid is very prolific on Quora as well. So yes, links to all of everything that Sid mentioned is in the description, and I'm going to throw Laurel's link in there as well, because why not? And as for me, you guys know me, NecroVMX on YouTube and Twitch, John Sierra Tolkien Scholar here on YouTube, if you're watching this on YouTube later, and of course you can find me on Quora as well. So let's say goodbye, gentlemen.
Remember Greyhaven.
Yep. So we're gonna. That's exactly where we're going, because we're going. Guys. Oh, that's not the right one. We're going over here.
Seeing ya.
Oh, I don't have you guys on this screen, do I? Okay, well, normally I go over the whole schedule by changing scenes and everything. I'm just going to do it verbally here to let you guys who are watching on Twitch know what's going on for the next week or so. That tomorrow afternoon I will be playing Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door for the GameCube. Saturday night, Xenoblade Chronicles Cross for the Wii U. Sunday night, Castlevania Portrait of Ruin on the DS. Monday afternoon, Capcom vs. SNK Millennium Fight 2000 on the Dreamcast. I'm doing this from memory. Isn't that impressive? Tuesday night, 9 Years of Shadows. We're going to be starting that. That's for Steam. And then Wednesday afternoon, here's where the memory fails. Elder Scrolls 4 Oblivion. We'll talk about lore on there as well. That's on Steam. Thursday night, a week from today, well, I'll let you guys know. It's either going to be... I'll either read The Hobbit for you guys, we'll finish The Hobbit, or perhaps we'll play that Voodoo Vince, or whatever the heck it was called, for Gray, for reaching 1 million channel points. But anyway, guys, we're going to go ahead and do a raid. So that'll end the stream. Don't go anywhere just yet, guys. Please stick around through the raid, because that does help support me. Who's online? Do we have anybody Tolkien related online? No, but my friend Amethyst Corn is streaming, playing something called, what is this? Amethyst's great. She'll like the Tolkien crowd because she's a big fan of the Lord of the Rings as well. She's one of the few people that isn't from the scholarship community, but that I could make these references and she generally understands what I'm talking about. She's playing something called Captain Contraption's Chocolate Factory. I'm not sure what that is, but let's raid her. Good friend of mine from the West Coast. Not that far from you, Matt.
All right, West Coast represent.
I thought you were going to start rapping for a moment. Okay.
Oh, yeah, no one wants to hear that.
And I kind of do. Let's get a raid call going here.
Rap for you.
What's a good Tolkien quote that we could raid her with? How about, how we'll do the steward thing. For I am a steward too, did you not know? Okay, guys. That's going to pop up in the chat. All you need to do is copy it, paste it once it changes over to her stream, give her some support and everything. I will see you guys over there. I will see you guys on the Discord if you're on there. I'll see you guys on YouTube. I'll see you guys on Quora. I will see you guys tomorrow because I stream every day. Here we go.
Our next show will be?
Oh, yes, that's right. We'll do that real quick. The next show is going to be the 5th of September. And here we go.
Outstanding.